Welcome to the Maine Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs training. This training will provide an overview of the National School Lunch Program meal pattern requirements. School nutrition programs use food-based menu planning. Food components are foods that have been grouped together based upon their nutritional contribution to the diet. The 5 food components are fruits, vegetables, grains, meat alternates, and fluid milk. The meal pattern requires specific meal components to be offered in certain amounts to qualify as a reimbursable meal. Reimbursable meals allow a school to receive benefits, including reimbursement dollars for each meal served to a student, as well as USDA food entitlement dollars. The lunch meal pattern requires that all 5 food components be offered to students. The 5 food components must be offered in minimum serving sizes and quantities by day and week. The amounts offered vary by grade groups, K-5, 6-8, and 9-12. We'll go through each of these in this presentation. School meals are designed to provide an abundance of nutrients with sufficient calories. The amounts listed on the meal pattern chart are a range of calories to be offered each day when averaged over the 5-day week. Follow the meal pattern guidelines and the meals you plan are likely to meet the calorie range goals. Good menu planning includes balance and variety with foods. The meal patterns are built on the principles of good menu planning. Starting in school year 2026, there are limits on added sugar, not total or naturally occurring sugar, but added sugar. These limits are being phased in over a couple of years. So starting July 1st, 2025, there are product-specific limits on added sugar that's found in cereal, yogurt, and flavored milk. And then on July 1st, 2027, there will be an overall weekly limit on added sugar in meals to be no more than 10% of weekly calories. So again, starting July 1st, 2025, there are product-specific limits on added sugar for breakfast cereals, yogurt, and flavored milk. Breakfast cereals may have no more than 6 grams of added sugar per dry ounce. Yogurt may have no more than 12 grams of added sugar per 6 ounces, or 2 grams of added sugar per ounce. And finally, flavored milk may have no more than 10 grams of added sugar per 8 fluid ounces. Saturated fat is often found in forms that are solid at room temperature, including milk fat, butter, or the fat inside or around meat. Limiting saturated fat in school meals helps reduce the risk of children developing heart disease later in life. The meal patterns emphasize foods that are naturally low in or free of saturated fats. Calories from saturated fat must average less than 10% of the total calories of the weekly menu. The amounts listed on the meal pattern chart are the maximum amount of sodium in a lunch when averaged over the 5-day week. Consideration should be given to scratch cooking, using herbs and spices in place of salt, and purchasing lower sodium products. By following the meal pattern guidelines, the meals you plan are likely to meet the sodium targets. It is important to be aware that not all foods and beverages contribute toward the meal pattern requirements. Only creditable foods do. A creditable food is one that can count towards the meal pattern for a reimbursable meal because of its nutrient content and FDA standard of identity. We are now going to go through each of the food components. The fruit component has both daily and weekly minimum quantities that must be offered. Servings are measured in volume, cups, not weight or ounces. It is important to note that the meal pattern chart lists minimum quantities to be offered to students, but a student may always select more than the minimum serving. The minimum daily serving sizes for fruit at lunch are 1/2 cup for grades K through 5, 1/2 cup for grades 6 through 8, and 1 cup for grades 9 through 12. Over the course of the week, They need to be offered 2.5 cups of fruit, grades K through 5, 2.5 cups of fruit for grades 6 through 8, and 5 cups of fruit in grades 9 through 12. The fruit that's offered can be fresh, frozen, canned, dried, or 100% fruit juice. If you're offering canned fruit, it needs to be 100% fruit, packed in light syrup, 100% juice, or water. When offering juice, it must be pasteurized, be 100% juice, and over the course of the week, no more than half of the fruit component requirement can come from the form of juice. When offering dried fruit, a 1/4 cup equals a 1/2 cup serving. And as I already mentioned, fruit is credited as volume and not weight. Take a minute to pause the video and review the fruit options offered for lunch on the sample menu and try to determine if the minimum daily quantities have been met. As a reminder, for grades K through 5 and 6 through 8, at least a 1/2 cup fruit must be offered at lunch. At grades 9 through 12, at least 1 cup of fruit must be offered at lunch. Okay, now that you've completed that exercise, let's go through it. When you're looking at the sample menu for grades K through 5 and 6 through 8, the minimum amount of fruit to be offered was met on every single day of the week. Again, with Thursday, keep in mind that a dried fruit like a craisin or a raisin, a 1/4 cup serving, counts as a 1/2 cup of fruit. Looking at the sample menu for grades 9 through 12, each day met except for Monday, where they did not offer 1 cup of fruit. The vegetable component also has both daily and weekly minimum quantities that must be offered. Servings are measured in volume, cups, not weight, ounces, just like fruit. It's important to note that the meal pattern chart lists minimum quantities to be offered, and again, just like the fruit component, students certainly may select more than the minimum serving if they choose. The minimum serving sizes for the vegetable component at lunch are, for grades K through 5, 3/4 cup of vegetable must be offered. Grades 6 through 8, also 3/4 cup of vegetables to be offered. And at the high school level, 9 through 12, you must offer those students 1 cup of vegetables every single day. And by meeting your daily minimum offerings, you will also meet the weekly requirements that need to be offered. When offering vegetables, they can be fresh, frozen, or canned. If you're serving leafy greens such as romaine lettuce or baby spinach, they credit as half the amount. So for example, a 1 cup of lettuce or baby spinach will count as a 1/2 cup vegetable serving. It's the opposite of the dried fruit that we talked about earlier. Beans, peas, and lentils may be offered as either a vegetable or a meat alternate component. The menu planner decides which component they're offering them for. And with the vegetable component, there are also weekly vegetable subgroup requirements. So what this means is that over the course of the week, different vegetables from the different subgroups must be offered to students. The vegetable subgroups are dark green, red orange, beans, peas, lentils, starchy, and other. Each of the vegetable subgroups contribute different combinations of nutrients, making it important for individuals to consume vegetables from all of the subgroups. A variety of vegetables also adds color and interest to your menus. In addition to offering vegetables each day in minimum amounts by grade group, vegetables from each subgroup must also be offered over the course of the week. A 1/2 cup of vegetables from the dark green, beans, peas, lentils, starchy, and other vegetable subgroups must be offered, and a larger quantity of vegetables from the red-orange subgroup must be offered each week. The red-orange subgroup requires that at least 3/4 cup be available in grades K through 8 and 1¼ cup be available for grades 9 through 12. And now we're going to do an activity with the vegetable component at lunch. So take a minute to pause the video and review the vegetable offerings for lunch on the sample menu and try to determine if the minimum daily quantities have been met. As a reminder, for grades K through 8, at least 3/4 cup of vegetables must be offered at lunch, and for grades 9 through 12, at least 1 cup of vegetables needs to be offered at lunch. Okay, so with our sample menu, for grades K through 8, the minimum offering of 3/4 cup was met on every single day, with the exception of Wednesday, when only a 1/2 cup of vegetable was offered. At the high school 9 through 12 level, every single day, they met the minimum amount to be offered of 1 cup, with the exception of both Thursday and Friday. So on Thursday, while they did offer a 1/2 cup of lettuce and a 1/2 cup broccoli, remember with your leafy greens, it will take a 1/2 cup to count as a 1/4 cup, or in this case, they would need 1 cup of lettuce to count as a 1/2 cup of vegetable. And on Friday, only 3/4 cup of vegetable was offered, with the 1/4 cup peas and 1/2 cup of fries. Grains are required to be offered for the National School Lunch Program each day. There are both daily and weekly minimum requirements that must be available. For grades K through 8, at least a 1 ounce equivalent of grain must be offered each day. And for grades 9 through 12, at least 2 ounce equivalents of grains must be offered each day. For the weekly requirements, grades K through 8 must offer 8 ounce equivalents of grains over the course of the week. And for grades 9 through 12, at least 10 ounce equivalents of grain must be offered over the week. And as you can see by these amounts, if you're only offering the daily minimum each day, you will not meet the weekly minimum for grades K through 8. So it's important to make sure that as the menu planner, you are offering more than 1 ounce equivalent on certain days to make sure that the weekly minimum is also met. The following types of ingredients are considered creditable grains in child nutrition programs. Whole grain, which includes whole wheat flour, brown rice, rolled oats, whole corn. Enriched grain, which includes enriched wheat flour and enriched rice, and corn masa, hominy, and masa harina. Some food examples of grains include breads, biscuits, bagels, rolls, tortillas, crackers, pretzels, breakfast cereal, pasta, and rice. Please note that potato products are in the starchy vegetable food component and not the grain component. In the National School Lunch Program, at least 80% of the grains offered over the course of the school week must be whole grain rich. A product that is whole grain rich is either made from 100% whole grain, or it's a blend of grain ingredients where the whole grain ingredients are at least half of all grain ingredients in the product. We measure grains in what's called ounce equivalents. You will need to understand the difference between ounce equivalents and ounces when menu planning. This topic is covered in the training on crediting meal components. We can tell if a product is whole grain by looking at the ingredients list on the package itself. When looking at the ingredient list, you're looking at the very first ingredient listed. You want to see if the whole grain ingredient that's listed first says something like whole grain rolled oats or whole wheat flour. You're looking for the word whole in that first ingredient. The only exception is if water is listed first, followed by the whole grain ingredient. Be sure to check ingredient labels carefully, as packaging can be very deceiving. With the example provided on the screen, the package says made with whole grains. But when you turn over the package and look at the ingredient list, The first ingredient listed is enriched wheat flour. So would you consider this a whole grain? The answer is no, and that's because enriched wheat flour is not a whole grain product. It needs to have the word whole to be considered whole grain rich. It's really important to get familiar with reading product labels and ingredient lists. At lunch, if you're offering a 2-ounce grain-based dessert, there is a weekly limit of 2-ounce equivalents. These items are identified on the resource Exhibit A, Grain Requirements for Child Nutrition Programs, and it includes items such as cookies, pies, cakes, brownies, sweet rolls, toaster pastries, and even breakfast bars. It's very important that you use this resource when planning the grain component of your menu so that you know which grain-based products are identified as grain-based desserts and have that weekly limit of 2-ounce equivalents. The next component we will look at is the meat alternate component. The meat alternate component is also measured in ounce equivalents, just like the grain component. So this is the amount of food that represents 1 ounce of edible portion of lean meat without the bone. The meat component includes meat, poultry, and fish. It can be fresh, frozen, canned, or processed. It also includes nuts and seeds, eggs, yogurt, cheese, legumes, tofu, and tempeh. These would be considered meat alternates. And when offering beans and legumes, the menu planner is choosing whether they are counting them as a meat alternate or as a vegetable. The meat alternate component is a required component for school lunch. Like many of the other components, there are both daily and weekly minimum requirements that have to be met. So for grades K through 8, you must offer at least 1 ounce equivalent of meat alternate at lunch every day. For grades 9 through 12, you must offer at least 2 ounce equivalents of meat alternate each day. And again, similar to that grain component, the weekly minimums will not be met for grades K through 8 if you're only offering the daily minimum of 1 ounce equivalent. The weekly minimums for grades K through 5 are 8 ounce equivalents of grain needs to be offered over the week, and for grades 6 through 8, 9 ounce equivalent of grain needs to be offered each week, and through grades 9 through 12, at least 10 ounce equivalents of grain must be offered each week. The final meal component we're going to discuss is fluid milk. 1 cup of fluid cow's milk must be offered every day for all grade groups. The milk offered must be pasteurized and have vitamin A and D at the levels specified by the FDA. Milk must be low fat or 1% or skim or fat-free. It can be flavored or unflavored, and at least 2 different types of milk must be offered. The reason for this is that we want children to drink milk to get the nutrition they need. By increasing the variety that's offered, they're more likely to find the type that they prefer and actually consume it. If you choose, you may offer non-dairy milk substitutes in place of milk, but only under certain conditions. You are not required to do this, but if you do, you must have the request in writing from the parent or guardian. And the non-dairy option that you provide must have the same or better nutrient profile as cow's milk. To the best of my knowledge, there are some non-dairy soy beverages that meet this criteria, but many non-dairy beverages such as oat, rice, and almond milk do not meet this criteria and therefore cannot be offered in place of cow's milk in the National School Lunch Program. So again, this is optional to offer this option with a parent request. However, in cases of a disability which require a non-dairy alternative to cow's milk, you must have the completed medical statement from the doctor, and then you have to follow the instructions on the form. So that would be the only case when there may be a non-dairy option that's provided that does not meet the nutrition criteria. So here's the nutrition profile of cow's milk. If providing a non-dairy option with written parental request, the substitute that you offer must meet or exceed the nutrition criteria on the screen. Non-creditable food products may be offered in the National School Lunch Program, but they do not credit as a food component for a reimbursable meal. They do, however, count towards the limit of average calories, saturated fats, and sodium. This concludes our training on the National School Lunch Program meal pattern requirements. If you have any questions, please contact our office at child.nutrition@maine.gov or 207-624-6842.